Byzantium is gone. In 1204, the Crusaders stormed Constantinople, and on the ruins of the old empire created their own bunch of states, while the parts that remained Greek would struggle, not only against the Crusaders, but also against each other, to rebuild Byzantium. So, what happened next? We know the story of the Fourth Crusade already. Alexius Angelus invites the Crusaders to restore his father, and promises them a lot of money. He doesn't pay up, and the Crusaders tear down the empire. Just like after the First Crusade, it was time to share the spoils. Baldwin, Count of Flanders, and a prominent Crusader leader, was given Constantinople and the surrounding areas, creating the Latin Empire. Another leader, Boniface, the Marquis of Montferrat, was granted the city of Thessalonica, and was proclaimed its king. Athens was given to a Burgundian nobleman, Otto, and Achaia was conquered in 1205 on the orders of Thessalonica. Venetians, having heavily contributed during the sacking of Constantinople, took some islands and a whole lot of jewelry and treasures from the sacked city for safekeeping. Greek heartland was divided among the Latins, but a few Greek rump states remained. To the west, the former emperor's cousin Michael Komnenos Doukas claimed Epirus, while in the east two states emerged, the Nicaean Empire under Theodore Lascaris and the Empire of Trebizond under the Komnenos brothers. Trebizond was very far away, and the Latin states were very unstable, so now Epirus and Nicaea found themselves in a race to restore the former empire. The newly formed Latin Empire had an amazing start. The people of Constantinople didn't like the new Catholic ruling class and church, at all. The Emperor Baldwin also had very bad relations with other Crusader states, even though all of them were his de jure vassals. He had some success as he managed to take some lands from Nicaea, but then the Thracian Greeks rebelled, and Baldwin had to go and deal with that. Unfortunately for Baldwin, the rebels were raided by the Bulgarian Tsar Kaloyan, known as the fucking Roman killer. Baldwin and his boys were defeated near Adrianople, and after less than a year of ruling, Baldwin was imprisoned and died in jail. The Latin Empire then came to be ruled by his younger brother Henry, but in a much smaller format than before. Thessalonica was doing only slightly better. Their next door neighbor Epirus was at the moment peaceful, but their other neighbor, Roman killer Kaloyan, wasn't nearly as nice. Bulgarians raided and pillaged Crusader territories and committed mass slaughters in cities they managed to take, and when King Boniface went out to try and stop that, he was ambushed and killed. His head was sent to Kaloyan as a gift, and the Tsar came down to Thessalonica to besiege it. Kaloyan was legit a madman, and during the siege it was said that Saint Demetrius, the patron saint of Thessalonica himself, came down to his tent and killed him. Well, it's much more likely that his brother Borel had him killed, but the first story is much cooler. Anyway, Borel took power in Bulgaria, but he was no Kaloyan, so Emperor Henry defeated him at Plovdiv, and Bulgaria stopped being a threat for a while. The peace was strengthened by the marriage of Henry to Kaloyan's daughter Maria. Nicaea played the post-Byzantium Game of Thrones very well. Emperor Theodore used the Latin defeat at Adrianople to expand, but when the energetic Henry came to power, Theodore was driven out. Theodore sought to expand to the east on the account of Trebizond, which was too far away from Constantinople to be a possible rival. Trebizond itself was also very busy with fighting the Seljuk Turks, but Nicaea would have that problem as well. Theodore would fight the Seljuks at Antioch on the Meander, where the outcome of the battle was decided, get this, in a duel between the two rulers, Emperor Theodore and the Sultan Kai Kushra, which Theodore won. The new Sultan and Theodore concluded peace and invaded Trebizond together. The Nicaean Empire became the most powerful Byzantine successor, and many Greeks from Europe found refuge there. The Patriarch of Constantinople came to Nicaea as well, since the head of all Orthodoxy was no longer welcome in Constantinople. However, this status would soon be contested. Epirus was claimed by the Angelus family, and its ruler Michael, due to the weakness of the state, had to swear fealty to the Latin Emperor. However, he mustered up the courage to invade Thessalonica, which is currently in somewhat of a succession crisis after King Boniface had been killed. Bulgaria wanted a piece of Thessalonica as well, but Henry wouldn't have any of that, and defeated both of them in battle. Henry restored order to Thessalonica, naming his brother regent, while Michael was forced to bow down once again. Well, Michael was a smart guy and knew when a cause was lost, so he turned to consolidating his state. He was then promptly assassinated in 1214 and was succeeded by his half-brother Theodore. Theodore was very ambitious and, allied with Serbia, invaded Bulgaria and Macedonia. Then he turned his eye to Thessalonica and invaded. Henry, of course, tried to stop this tomfoolery, but was suddenly poisoned by his wife on the way there. Constantinople was now emperorless, so Henry's brother-in-law Peter of Courtenay was elected. Peter couldn't sail directly to Constantinople, so he had to trek there on foot. Well, as soon as he stepped into Epirus, he was captured and imprisoned, being the second Latin emperor to die in prison and the first one to never see his capital. The Latin Empire is now very much in trouble, and the current regent, Peter's widow Yolanda, is more than aware of that fact. In order to keep the peace with Nicaea, she arranged the marriage between the recently widowed Emperor Theodore and her daughter, while she also gave birth to a son called Baldwin. Yolanda, however, died only 2 years later after her husband, in 1219, and the regency was passed on until 1221 when Peter's and Yolanda's son Robert came of age. The same year Theodore of Nicaea died, and a succession crisis emerged between his brothers Isaac and Alexius and his son-in-law John. Isaac and Alexius were aided by the Latins, but John defeated them in the Battle of Poimanenon and managed to almost completely expel the Latins from Asia. Theodore of Epirus used the defeat of the Latins to conquer Thessalonica once and for all, and in 1224 he took over the city of Thessalonica, proclaiming himself emperor. The situation was tense. Two very ambitious and dedicated emperors were now vying for power, but one with the upper hand was Theodore of Epirus. He allied with the new Bulgarian Tsar Ivan Asen II, and his forces were slowly creeping up to Constantinople. John of Nicaea, of course, wasn't a big fan of this and tried to stop it, but was unsuccessful. By 1227, Latins were completely driven out to Thrace and held only Constantinople. Theodore grew just a tad bit too cocky and turned on his Bulgarian ally, as he saw them as a threat. That didn't go very well for him, since Asen defeated him at Klokotnitsa in 1230. This battle was a disaster for Epirus. The emperor was imprisoned and blinded in Bulgaria, and the country shattered. Theodore's brother Manuel managed to seize power, but was soon undermined by his illegitimate nephew Michael II. Meanwhile, Bulgaria took almost everything, and Epirus was no longer a candidate for restoring the empire. This was stupefying news for Nicaea, that immediately made an alliance with Bulgaria, and harrowing news for the Latins, since they were encircled. In 1235, Bulgarians and Greeks started a joint siege of Constantinople, held by the regent emperor John of Brienne. The siege didn't really go well, and in the autumn of the same year, the besiegers retreated. The two emperors made a deal to continue next spring, but the next spring came and Ivan Asen didn't show up. Emperor John then promptly ended his friendship with Bulgaria and sought to find new allies. The son of Yolanda and Peter, Baldwin II, became emperor soon after and went around Western Europe begging for aid, which would, quite surprisingly, never come. One day, 7 years after the Battle of Klokotnitsa, a familiar face arrived in Thessalonica, the capital of Epirus. You might think that this is just a regular old blind hobo, but in reality, it's former Emperor Theodore, disguised as hobo, and definitely not one. He was allowed to leave jail because Ivan Asen started fancying his daughter, and he caused quite a ruckus when he came back. Firstly, he plotted to overthrow his younger brother Manuel, and did just that. Manuel then promptly sought help from Nicaea and received it, on the condition to swear fealty to Nicaea after he was restored. Theodore, who placed his son John on the throne, didn't like this news at all, so he contacted his brother, and they agreed to split the country between them. Soon after, in 1241, Manuel died, and his nephew Michael II, who had previously become quite powerful, seized his entire domain, while Theodore was called to Nicaea for a nice little gathering of friends. He went to Nicaea and was, quite unexpectedly, imprisoned. Even better for Nicaea, Ivan Asen died the same year, and Thrace and Macedonia became free for the taking. Then, Emperor John sent his forces to besiege Thessalonica. The siege didn't go very well, and was rudely interrupted by a Mongol invasion to the east. John decided to leave, but he left Theodore to negotiate with John on John's behalf, so that John didn't have to come back and kill John. John was actually very willing to give up the city, but Theodore, always a troublemaker, convinced him not to do that, and when the Mongol situation was regulated, John found John still holding out. The two Johns eventually reached an agreement. John of Epirus would renounce his title of emperor, but would keep all of his holdings and rule as despot, as a Nicaean vassal of course. 2 years later despot John died, and Theodore, the de facto ruler, placed his younger son Demetrius in power. Demetrius was a party-loving, milf-seducing piece of shit, and nobody liked him, so Nicaeans were invited to invade. Thessalonica was captured, Demetrius was exiled, but Theodore managed to wiggle his way to his nephew Michael. While there, he managed to convince Michael to attack the Nicaeans and reclaim Thessalonica. Well, that didn't go very well, but Michael was allowed to keep his holdings as a Nicaean vassal. That little rascal Theodore, however, was seized and exiled, somewhere far away, where he caused no more trouble, and where he died in 1253. Nicaea was on the top of the world at that point. Then, in 1254, Emperor John died, and things got slightly more complicated. Bulgarians used the change on the throne to invade Macedonia and Thrace, which the new Emperor Theodore II barely managed to fight off. The Mongols became a problem once again, and Theodore would have to deal with them as well. During Theodore's reign, one peculiar character, called Michael Palaeologus, became very influential, and the emperor didn't trust him one bit. Michael was exiled to the Seljuks, where he led a mercenary army. In 1258 he was recalled by Theodore, who suffered from an epilepsy-like illness and was described as being thin like a skeleton, paranoid, and somewhat insane. What happened to this man I can't fathom, but he died in 1258 and was succeeded by his 8-year-old son John IV. A regent was chosen for the young emperor, but Michael had that regent deposed and fucking murdered, just so Michael could come to be regent. Well, he wouldn't be regent for long, because in 1259 he proclaimed himself emperor, and John IV was his co-ruler only nominally. Michael's reputation all around the Balkans wasn't very good, to say the least, so Michael of Epirus, King of Sicily Manfred, the Duke of Athens Guy, the Prince of Achaia William, and a few other Latin countries allied against Nicaea and launched a campaign. The armies of two Michaels met near Pelagonia in 1259, but because Michael of Epirus and his Latin allies didn't trust each other, Michael withdrew before the battle began and the Latins suffered a catastrophic defeat. Michael had to flee as soon as possible, and Nicaea completely conquered his realm. The resistance of the Epirotes, however, was so strong that Michael of Nicaea decided it would be more beneficial to just leave them be, and Michael of Epirus managed to restore his country, albeit slightly smaller. With all opposition suppressed, there was only one thing left for Nicaea to do, and it was just taking Constantinople. The Latin Empire was on its last legs and couldn't realistically defend itself. In 1261, on the 25th of July, one Nicaean general called Alexius Strategopoulos found a way to enter Constantinople through a secret passage, and the city was taken. Michael entered the city and was crowned as sole emperor, while poor John IV was blinded and confined to a monastery. The Latin Emperor Baldwin II hastily fled the city, and the Franco-Cratia was finally over. Aside from Athens, Achaia and the islands, which were still under the Latins, but we'll gloss over that for now. Byzantium was back, but its future wouldn't be all that bright. On that, some other time. Thanks for watching. I wanted to try something new, so I made a YouTube short to go along with this video. Since I have no idea how YouTube shorts work, if you have some suggestions and tips, I would love to hear them. Have a good day.